ever feel like your career's kind of, stuck? Like you're just going through the motions day after day.
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
Totally. But that's why today we're going to dive into a whole bunch of articles and advice on career advancement. And trust me, this is anything BUT boring. We're talking like practical tips, personal branding, even got some insights from an executive coach.
It's about more than just climbing the ladder, right? It's about figuring out how to build a career you actually find fulfilling and, successful on your terms.
Exactly. And one thing that really jumped out from like a lot of these articles was the need to be proactive, not just waiting for the perfect opportunity.
Right. It's not enough to just be good at your job and hope somebody notices. You've got to actually shape your own path.
So less about waiting for something to fall in your lap and more about making your own opportunities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that all starts with, figuring out what advancement even means to you. Is it a promotion, more money, or maybe it's more flexibility and control over your time?
That reminds me of this point in the Millibank article about how spending money on things that save us time, like it actually makes us happier than buying more stuff. And it got me thinking maybe career advancement should be less about chasing a bigger paycheck and more about creating a work life that gives us back our most valuable resource, time.
I love that. And the CEO from that How to Advance Your Career 10X Faster article had a great point about this. He was saying how the employees who weren't moving up in their careers, it wasn't always about ambition. Sometimes they were going about it all wrong or they were just too passive.
So it's like Goldilocks and the career paths. You don't want to be the annoying overachiever, but you also don't want to be the wallflower who never speaks up. It's about finding that sweet spot of taking strategic action.
Right. And sometimes that means looking for ways to grow within the role you're already in, which is where that whole entrepreneurship idea comes in from the Upwork article.
Okay, so unpack that for me, because I feel like entrepreneurship could mean a lot of different things.
Basically, it's about using that entrepreneurial mindset, BUT, within a company. Looking for ways to do things better, taking initiative, maybe even, bending the rules a little to get things done.
So even if you're not in a position to like launch a whole new product line, you can still be creative and make a real impact.
Exactly. But of course, that only works if you're in a workplace that actually encourages that kind of initiative,
And let's be real, not all companies are like that. Some places are all about following the rules, no room for shaking things up. So what happens if you realize the company you're at, it's not exactly the entrepreneurial playground you were hoping for?
That's where, like a lot of these articles were saying, you got to do an honest self-assessment. Like really ask yourself, is there actually space for me to grow here, or am I hitting a ceiling?
Which can be a tough thing to admit, especially if you like your job and the people you work with.
It definitely can be. But the 6 Practical Tips article, they made a good point about how even just the process of looking for a new job can be a chance to grow, even if you don't actually switch jobs right away.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. They suggested like looking at those dream job descriptions, not to see if you're a perfect fit right now, but to figure out what skills you'd need to get there.
I love that. It kind of turns job hunting from this scary thing into like a learning experience. And speaking of being proactive, that advice about networking was surprisingly helpful. It's not just about going to every industry event and hoping for the best. It's about being way more targeted, right?
Right. One article even had this example about how it's better to focus on like connecting people in your network who can help each other, instead of just trying to collect business cards. It's about actually adding value.
Okay, that is next level networking for sure. And it actually ties into something else that kept coming up, this whole personal branding thing. Because even with a great network, you still have to give people a reason to actually want to support you.
It's not enough to just be good at your job. You have to be known for it, right? The executive coach we read about, she called it building your personal brand. She actually used this really interesting analogy about advertising.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
She was saying, just like we have to see an ad multiple times before it really sticks in our minds, we need to consistently show our value to the people around us, our network, colleagues, everyone.
So it's about showing up and sharing your expertise consistently, not just hoping that someone magically realizes how awesome you are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And LinkedIn is like the perfect platform for this.
Oh yeah, the Invest in Yourself article had some good tips about that, like actually sharing your thoughts on industry news instead of just posting like inspirational quotes that everybody scrolls past.
Right. It's about positioning yourself as someone with valuable insights, a thought leader in your field.
So it's like the digital version of dress for the job you want, not the job you have. But on LinkedIn, you're posting for the job you want.
I love that. And keep in mind, a strong online presence is just one piece of the puzzle when it comes to investing in your career.
Totally. We still need the skills to back it all up, right?
Absolutely. And that doesn't always mean spending thousands of dollars on fancy degrees.
Which, thank goodness, because student loan debt is no joke.
Right. But, there are so many affordable ways to learn new skills. Actually, a bunch of these articles highlighted community college as a surprisingly budget-friendly option.
Oh, that's a really good point.
Yeah, they offer really practical job-ready programs and certifications, without all the extra stuff.
Love it. Okay, so we've covered being proactive, figuring out what success means to you, and of course, getting those skills, both the hard skills and those elusive soft skills everyone keeps talking about.
Oh yeah, let's unpack that for a second, because soft skills can feel like such a vague term.
Totally. What does that even mean in the real world?
Well, when you really break it down, it's all about how you interact with other people, how you approach your work, how you handle the inevitable curveballs that come up in any career, right? And one of the most crucial ones, according to a lot of what we read, is communication.
Which makes sense, because you could have the most brilliant ideas, but if you can't get them across, it doesn't really matter.
Exactly. And that means being a good communicator, both in writing and verbally, being able to explain your ideas clearly, write persuasively, present confidently. These are all super valuable no matter what you do.
So it's about more than just being a good talker. It's about being clear, concise, making sure your message is getting across no matter what.
Exactly.
And it's not just about making sure everyone hears your ideas. It's about actually listening to what other people have to say too.
Oh, absolutely. Active listening, that's huge EE. And honestly, I think it's a skill that often gets overlooked. It's about really taking the time to hear what someone is saying, asking questions to make sure you understand, really making them feel heard.
Which, let's be real, that's harder than it sounds, especially at work when everyone's super busy and vying for attention.
For sure. It definitely takes practice, but it makes a world of difference in your career, A&D, in your life, I think. And, it ties into another one of those essential soft skills, empathy.
Okay, so how does empathy play into all of this?
Well, think about it. When you can actually put yourself in someone else's shoes, understand where they're coming from, even if you don't agree with them, it's so much easier to build trust. It's easier to work through disagreements, collaborate effectively, all of that.
So it's like being able to see things from different perspectives, finding that common ground, even when, let's be real, there are always going to be disagreements at work, right?
Exactly. And when those disagreements happen, that's when it's so important to be able to give and receive feedback in a way that's actually helpful, not just critical or, hurtful.
Ooh, yeah, that is a delicate balance for sure. Something I'll admit I've definitely struggled with in the past.
Oh, tell me about it. It takes practice. The Upwork article had a good tip about asking for feedback instead of just that general, how am I doing? Which, let's be honest.
It's a loaded question.
Totally. Puts the other person on the spot. But if you ask something specific, like, what's one thing I could have done differently in that presentation? Or something like that, that's way more helpful.
It shows you're actually open to learning and growing, which is huge.
It's huge. And it plays into another soft skill that I think is only becoming more important as things change so quickly these days. Adaptability.
Okay, tell me more about that. Because it feels like the one constant at work these days, IS change, new technology, new challenges. It's like you can barely keep up.
Exactly. And companies are having to adapt constantly to stay ahead, which means employees need to as well. Right.
So being able to learn new things quickly, being okay with things changing, that's becoming just as important as the deep expertise you have.
Exactly. And that can feel overwhelming sometimes, but it also opens up so many opportunities. And it's not just about big company changes. It's also about being flexible and resourceful in your everyday work.
So being able to solve problems, roll with the punches when things don't go according to plan, which, let's be honest, is pretty much always, right?
Pretty much always.
Okay, so we've got communication, empathy, adaptability. It's like a crash course in being a good human and a good employee. But here's the question I always have when we talk about this stuff, especially alongside this idea of always learning and growing and doing more. How do we balance all of this with actually having a life?
That's the $1 million question, right? Yeah. And it's something I think, especially people in those, demanding, fast-paced jobs, they really struggle with.
Because it can feel like you're always on, always supposed to be available, always striving for that next thing. It's exhausting.
Totally. And now with technology, it's like the lines between work and home are blurrier than ever.
The How to Advance Your Career article, they had a good point about that. For a lot of people, the pandemic made that whole work-life balance thing even harder.
Absolutely. And there's no easy answer, no one-size-fits-all solution. But the thing that a lot of these articles really emphasized, setting boundaries, making time for yourself.
Which, again, easier said than done. Like, that's a skill in itself, learning to actually disconnect and recharge.
It really is. It's about saying no sometimes, shutting off work email at a reasonable hour, actually making time for the things that make you feel good. Because when you're burnt out, you're no good to anyone, least of all yourself.
Yeah.
And that includes your career.
So true. Okay, so much good stuff here. But we've talked a lot about soft skills, but how do you actually show those skills, especially in like a job interview? It's not like you can just put expert in active listening on your resume.
Right. It's one thing to say you have these qualities, but you got to back it up with like concrete examples. Remember that networking example we talked about earlier about introducing people who could help each other?
Yes. Genius level networking.
That right there is you demonstrating active listening and relationship building, right? You're showing that you pay attention to people's needs and you actually want to help them.
So it's about telling stories, giving examples that show your soft skills in action, not just listing them out like bullet points.
Exactly. And those stories can come from anywhere in your life, not just your work experience. Did you lead a volunteer project that required crazy organization skills? Successfully navigate some drama in a group project in school?
This reminds me of that UWinnipeg article, how they talked about volunteering being a great way to build skills. AD, show that you're, a good human who cares about something bigger than just your career.
It's about showing, not just telling. Okay, so we've talked about being proactive, defining your version of success, mastering those tangible ADD and tangible skills, finding that elusive work-life balance.
Don't forget salary.
Yeah.
Because we can't pretend like it's not a factor.
Oh, of course. Money matters. We all got to pay the bills.
Yeah.
But a lot of these sources stress that it's about approaching salary negotiations strategically.
The Hayes article had that great advice about not bringing up salary too early in the game. Like, let them make the first offer, then you can negotiate from a position of strength.
Exactly. And data is your friend. Knowing your worth is key.
So like doing your research to figure out what other people in similar roles are making.
Exactly. Glassdoor, salary.com. Those are your best friends.
So do your homework, know what you deserve, and don't be afraid to ask for it. But what about when you're not actively job hunting, but you think you might be underpaid in your current job? That's a tougher conversation to start.
It definitely can be. And that's where keeping track of your achievements is so important. Remember we talked about that.
Like having a whole file of career wins ready to go when it's time for that raise conversation.
Exactly. Even just a simple document where you list out successful projects, positive feedback, times you went above and beyond, it's surprisingly helpful.
Because even the best bosses, they don't remember every single thing you've done, right? Having those reminders can make all the difference.
For sure. It shows you're serious about your career, that you're proactive, which, like we've been saying, is so important.
Okay, so we've got our negotiating strategies down, evidence of our awesomeness ready to go. But now I'm kind of overwhelmed. Like, where do we even begin to put all this into practice?
That's totally normal. It's a lot to process, for sure.
It's like we've opened this treasure chest of amazing career advice, but now we need, like, a map to actually navigate it all.
And that's where, starting small comes in. Remember that article, the one that was called Advance Your Career, 101 Fast Action Things You Can Do Today? It had a ton of great tips.
Oh, yeah, the one with the actual checklist.
Exactly. Little things you could do in like 15 minutes, like sprucing up your LinkedIn, reaching out to someone for a quick coffee chat. Even just looking into what kind of professional development stuff is out there, it all helps.
It's about building momentum, right? Sometimes you just need that little push to get started.
Exactly. And I think it's important to remember, career advancement, like real fulfilling advancement. It's rarely a straight line to the top. There are going to be twists and turns. It's a journey. The important thing is to, enjoy the process, the learning, all of it.
It's less about the destination and more about like becoming the best, most well-rounded version of ourselves along the way.
Exactly.
Okay,
so we talked about being prepared for salary negotiations, having your accomplishments ready to share. But let's be real. Sometimes you find yourself in a work situation That's just not great.
Like, what happens when you have a terrible boss or the company culture is just toxic?
That's when you really need to step back and be honest with yourself, right? Like, is this something you can actually fix? Or is it time to maybe, plan your escape route?
The 9 tips to advance your career article, they said that how you feel about your boss, like that relationship, it can make or break your whole work experience.
Oh, absolutely. If that relationship is beyond repair, sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away.
It's true. But even if you're not quite ready to quit, there are still things you can do to, protect yourself, right? Especially if things are volatile at work.
Definitely. One article, How to Advance Your Career. They really stressed knowing your company's policies inside and out. Like what happens to your unused vacation time if you quit, stuff like that.
Makes sense. Sometimes it pays to, stick it out a little longer if it means leaving with a little extra cash in your pocket.
Exactly. Even when you're feeling frustrated, try to be strategic. And that reminds me, another thing that came up a lot was documenting everything.
Documenting, like keeping track of all your wins at work.
Yes, projects you worked on, positive feedback, but also those, trickier interactions, maybe with your boss or coworkers. It might seem like overkill, but having that paper trail can be a lifesaver down the line.
So know your rights, document everything, and don't be afraid to walk away if a job is truly making you miserable. Got it.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, your mental health and well-being are what matters most. It's not just about building a career. It's about building a life you actually enjoy.
Yes, 1,000 times yes. Okay, we've covered so much good stuff in this deep dive. Any final words of wisdom for our listeners before we wrap things up? Something for them to think about as they, level up their careers?
We talked about a ton of strategies and tips, but honestly, I think the biggest takeaway, the thing I hope people really remember, is that the most valuable tool you have in your career is you. Your skills, your experiences, your unique perspective, all of it.
So it's not about trying to fit into some, perfect mold of what success should look like. It's about owning what makes you, you, and using that to your advantage.
Exactly. So as you're figuring out your own career path, ask yourself, what are my strengths? What makes me stand out? What are my hidden superpowers?
Love it. And once you figure those out, don't be afraid to let them shine. Show them off in your work, in your network, everywhere.
That's how you really level up, not just your career, but your whole work life.
That's a wrap. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling super inspired.
Me too. Thanks for having me. This was great.
And to all our listeners, go out there and be the CEOs of your own careers. We believe in you.